hoping we can get quite a few participants today, attendees today from Turkey, but also from around the world. Usually we have participants from everywhere from the side, the west and the east. So it's really lovely to see everyone online. I see you coming online now. We've got 58, 59 odd participants. If you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. But it's lovely to see the chats and to watch everybody coming online in the chat. So I do encourage you just to let us know where you're from. You could be from anywhere around the world. The Good Governance Academy operates in 135 countries now, and we have effectively a footprint to 5 million professionals around the world. So welcome to everybody online, and know that you are one of those professionals, and you're welcome to reach out to us at any point. What I would like to ask you today is what you want to hear about next in terms of governance from around the world. Today, we are hearing from Turkey. We have also heard from many other countries from around the world. But if you do have any specific countries that we haven't haven't hosted yet, we would love to hear from you in terms of what country you'd like to hear from next. But I see that we are on the hour, and thank you for telling us where you are from. That's lovely. I would like to, first of all, introduce everyone to Professor Dr. Gula Ara. Gula is one of our first and most fervent supporters for the Good Governance Academy out of the area of Turkey. And she is the founding chair of the Integrated Reporting Association of Turkey, or ERTA. And she founded that. She is also the director for the Center of Finance, Governance and Sustainability at YTU. Her extensive records really give her the credibility to provide a little bit of insights into good governance in Turkey for us today. She is a civil society leader and a researcher who leads key studies on finance, corporate governance, corporate sustainability, and integrated reporting. Her profile is up on our website, as well as the other speakers that we have today, and Gula will introduce the other speakers as we go through today's presentation. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Gula and ask Gula to just present to us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline. I would like to welcome all the audience and also speakers. And first of all, I would like to thank you for GGA, Good Governance Academy, for invitation, and also thank you for Mervyn King, established this such an important association and initiative. So today, as you said, we will give some kind of insight about the corporate governance experience in Turkey, and we will share our experience with my colleague Hale Oruç. She is the head of authorization and surveillance of the Capital Market Board of Turkey, and Gülhan Güler, Borsa İstanbul Executive Vice President. So I hope it will be inspiring session for all of us. So I would like to start with just general information about what I am thinking about the corporate governance. So as we all know, corporate governance practice have a vital role, especially for emerging economies, in terms of improving the investment climate and attracting the global financial flows. So today, of course, we can talk about many things in this context. However, when we think that the corporate governance is a practice in which the universal rules as well as the practices and regulations specific to the institutions that is constantly changing and developing, even the business conditions, culture, and traditions of the country are included in this process. We today consider the development process of the subject in our country. It is legal infrastructure and it is structuring in our capital markets. While I convey the fundamental building blocks and legal infrastructure, our corporate governance journey, our guests, our speakers, corporate representatives from Capital Market Board of Turkey and the National Stock Exchange, Borsa İstanbul, will share our corporate governance experience in some detail more than my explanation in terms of capital markets. So let me just share my slides first to give some. So I think we can see that. So again, as we all know, some issues can remain formal and unless we focus on the main factors that affect the success or failure of corporate governance. When this behavior are tried to be implemented formally, we cannot get the performance we want in terms of the sustainability and internalization with the organization, which is my main point when we are talking about the governance. Just regulation standards and principles are okay. We have to raise this one, but we have to just also follow up the real and concrete implementation of this. So for a behavior to be sustainable and internalized, continuous development, adaptation to change, and its adapting are required. And corporate governance is like that, is like definitely not static. So it is, adapting regarding the world, business, and human behavior and some regulations. When we look at the corporate governance failures in the world, we actually see the reflection of the governance structure and practices of human behavior on the management quality of institutions. So at this point, then regulations, standards, control, supervision, and the pursuit of the right way of doing business come to the fore. So at this point, I would like to share our audience to give some brief overview about some milestones and corporate governance development of Turkey with some detailed information. So we can count the beginning of corporate governance adaptation in Turkey as the tax procedure law, which was published in 1949, considering the regulation that determined the financial reporting obligations, which are the basis for the evaluation of the stakeholders in the historical process. And first of all, some limited accounting rules for taxpayers have been mentioned in the tax procedure law since 1952. It seems that the provision regarding disclosure of financial statement to the public were present for the first time in the Turkish Commercial Code, which was renewed in 1957. Later, we can see that responsibility of the determining the financial reporting principles of especially publicly traded companies was given to the responsibility of the Capital Market Board with the Capital Market Law, actually enacted in 1981. And then, as an OECD country, Turkey signed OECD Principle of the Corporate Governance in 1999. Since we are an OECD country, we had to apply of the 6 basis principle published in our country, and the work counted with 2003 for this. In Turkey, corporate governance principles are tried to be promoted effectively, especially in the institutionalizing process of family companies, and they are perceived and implemented as an important tool in this direction. This perception process has also been supported by the international research. For example, the result of the Emerging Market Investor Survey completed by McKinsey consulting company tell us the 3 basis criteria used in making investment decision in emerging markets such as Turkey, which is important for us to just attract the capital flow. First one is the implementation of the corporate governance principles, and second is making transparent reports and clear distinction between family management and company management shown as. So therefore, corporate governance can be perceived as an important business strategy beyond necessity. And Turkey has been among the countries that acted early and corporate governance. The first real study on corporate governance principle in Turkey in 2002 Corporate Governance Best Practice Code, and prepared by Turkish Industry and Business Association, TÜSİAD, one of the actually biggest business association in Turkey. After that, the Capital Market Board Corporate Governance Principles, which were prepared in 2003, and then recommendations for publicly traded companies were explained. And moreover, Corporate Governance Association Turkey established in this time of the actually Turkish corporate governance journey. With the Capital Market Board's complaint statement regulation in 2004, publicly traded companies are obliged to explain in their annual reports to what extent they comply with these principles and what are the reasons for non-compliance. This approach, called Comply and Explain, is an important development in terms of encouraging publicly companies to apply corporate governance principles before making mandatory principles. And apart from the capital market legislation, another legislation that come into force in Turkey in 2006, in which the concept of the corporate governance in the banking legislation, and the section on corporate governance in banking law, in which it is stated that the structure and process related to corporate governance and the principles related to them. It will be determined by the banking regulation and supervisory agency by taking the opinion of the Capital Market Board and Association of Institutions, consists of the 4 parts. The banking law also includes a provision to the banking regulatory authority will monitor, analyze, and measure to level of compliance of the bank with corporate governance principles. So another important development encouraging the corporate governance in our country was the creation of the Borsa Istanbul Corporate Governance Index in 2007, and Hüsam Bey will explain about this more and also give more detail about that. So the corporate governance approach was among the philosophies that dominated the construction phase of the Turkish Commercial Code, number 6102, which was adopted in 2011 and entered into force in 2012. The Turkish Commercial Code is a law that has been established based on corporate governance principles from the very beginning. I can say that this step is actually the most important development that I want to focus on within the scope of this meeting. With the 6102 law added to 2011, a new corporate governance era has been started in Turkey. I would like to also point out this one information for all audience. Mervyn King has been crucial role to develop the corporate governance in Turkey, and he always give a guidance for Turkey Corporate Governance Association and Turkish institutions. So, and I remember all year when we organized Turkish the Corporate Governance Summit, he was our main guest to explain what's going on in the world, how can we adapt in Turkey. So when we evaluate in terms of the corporate governance principle in Turkish Commercial Code is as a fundamental law, while the framework of corporate governance was determined, the Turkish Commercial Code emerged as a legal basis text of corporate governance. So the basic rationale of law is explained with 4 fundamental blocks, which are the basis of the corporate governance approach. So our corporate commercial law is exactly the reference of the 4 corporate governance principles. For example, with the principle of transparency, public disclosure and information are provided to the shareholders. And with the principle of fairness, shareholders are prohibited from borrowing from the company, and holding privileged shares among the shareholders is limited. The principle of accountability, the protection of minority rights, and establishment of the early detection committee has been have been ensured. And last one is principle of responsibility, the definition of authority and responsibility of board of directors. Boards of directors are related to issues such as determining the duration of operations, internal controls, internal audit committee, and early detection of the risk. These 4 blocks also form the basis of the relevant articles of the corporate governance approach in the Turkish Commercial Code. The law is not only limited the corporate governance principles to the listed companies, but also all associated, embodied, and explained them with the law of joint stock and limited companies. So when we continue our milestones, these milestones shows that the Turkey commitment to improving corporate governance practices and aligning with international standards. At this point, the latest development and regulation in Turkey draw attention to the concept of value creation, which is the main purpose of the corporate governance, and has been a very important step in direction companies to integrated thinking. As the Integrated Reporting Association of Turkey, our work is at the strong collaboration with the stakeholders, especially the Capital Market Board of Turkey and Borsa Istanbul, and public oversight accounting authority to support institutions in developing their corporate governance practices and the guide the value creation journey. Public oversight, accounting, auditing standards authority responsible for creating national sustainability standards, complain and adapting all global compatible with the global standards. Again, I would like to just back to the other slides, and they explain the the building blocks of our country's development. So we have the main development of the corporate governance journey in Turkey, most related with the new development of the sustainability, and the Capital Market Board of Turkey established the sustainability principles framework for Turkish companies at 2012, and sustainability compliance framework by amended in the corporate governance committee actually, so which is the main important development in Turkey to align with the companies implement sustainable principles, including corporate governance principles in their disclosure requirement with a compliant and explained rules. And the Capital Market Board of Turkey also announced that the main actually framework to how to disclose this this information in their annual report. So on the other side in Turkey, we are actually trying to push the company to prepare how to implement the corporate governance principles and internalize these principles to create value for the company instead of just like applying these principles. Actually, as an association of integrated report in Turkey, our main role as an academic and focus on the corporate governance and sustainable issue, our main role is that to promote and prepare the business and all institutions to implement the corporate governance principles and rules, and actually as much as we can. And also this mission actually important to align with the Turkish companies to the global competition level and the global companies competition level, and also very important to Turkey as an emerging country to attract the foreign capital flow and foreign direct investment, and actually be more focused on the in Turkey public governance and sustainability integrated thinking issue to actually better investment climate as an emerging country to attract the companies. So that's why I try to explain the corporate governance completely related with the value creation and sustainability. It is itself corporate governance principles not only enough to represent the company's soundness and resilience. These rules and principles have to combine with the other sustainable ESG indicators, and also, of course, the responsible company behaviors and financial results. So that's why we are trying to promote the integrated thinking and integrated reporting in Turkey to disclose corporate governance principles for corporate governance implementation to give a more encouragement for the companies to tell their story, value creation story, how corporate governance principles affect on their business success and how they affect the creating value for the companies. So this is very brief explanation what we have done in Turkey. This is like introduction for you. After me, Hale Oruç, as I introduced before, she's the head of authorization and surveillance of the Capital Market Board of Turkey, and she is also going to explain the more detail, even more detail about the what corporate governance association are doing. Capital Market Board of Turkey are doing more, make it more efficient. And also, I also keep pointed out that you can raise the principal standards and regulation. The main point is that how the companies implement this principle regulation and how much impact on the society for example, shareholder and stakeholder. I would like to see these regulations influence on the company's success and behave more responsible. So, Hale, the floor is yours now. I will stop my.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you also very much to Caroline and the Good Governance Academy. It's a pleasure to be here today. Hello to you all. My name is Hale Oruç. And today I'll try to give you a brief information on what Turkey's approach to corporate governance. I think it's better to provide some information about the governance structure and the history of corporate governance evaluation in Turkey in order to better understand our approach. Let me share my slides first. Okay. Let's start with the major characteristics of the Turkish corporate governance landscape. They can be listed as the high degree of concentrated ownership, dominance of family-owned companies, pyramidal structures and cross-ownership, limited degree of separation between ownership and the control, multiple voting shares and privilege shares, bank-based financial system, low floating rates, and limited institutional shareholding. In Turkey, approximately 95% of the companies are run by families, and they produce the 75% of national income. As we all know, the greatest strength of the family businesses is their resilience. They focused on the long-term perspective, they are dedicated to their names and reputation, and they are highly committed to grow and prosper. And also several studies conducted in various countries and periods revealed that in the long run, the family businesses outperformed their non-family business peers. But despite these drivers and advantages, there are also some disadvantages. The first one is that the average lifespan of the family-owned businesses is very short. For example, in Turkey, it's around 25 years, and 30% of these family businesses are handed down to the second generation, and 12% of them are handed down to the third generation, and only 3% are handed down to the fourth generation. And besides this, there is also the principal-to-principal conflict. I mean, the principal-to-principal conflicts are most likely to emerge because of the concentrated ownership. What does it mean? I mean, the principal-to-principal conflict means that the controlling shareholders have the ability and incentives to use company resources for their own benefit at the expense of minority shareholders. How? What are the outcomes of principal-to-principal conflicts? First, placed unqualified family members in control and overlooking better qualified outside professionals reduces the competitiveness of the company and harms stock performance. And high ownership concentration allows owner managers to set high compensation levels that put minority shareholders at a disadvantage. Second one is tunneling. Tunneling refers to intercompany transfers that favor the company in which the controlling shareholder has a larger equity stake. This is especially a problem in times of crisis. And the last one, we can say that the takeover risk falls, and this allows owner managers to indulge in activities that favor family members at the expense of stockholders, without having to worry about the disciplinary power of the market for corporate control. As a result, in the absence of effective minority shareholder protection, corporate valuation suffers. Moreover, Turkey, as Ms. Güler mentioned, as an emerging market economy and needs to attract foreign investments. But the factors I just mentioned make investment in most Turkish companies unattractive for the outside investors. So it is necessary to adopt governance mechanisms and also to strengthen the minority shareholders' rights, enhance public disclosure, and introduce further rules to curb the controlling owners' influence in listed companies. This is why we needed corporate governance in Turkey. Now, what we have done until now. Our journey started with the banking crisis of 2000 and 2001.
Hale, can you make it full screen, please? Your presentation.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. In this crisis, banks suffered large losses on loans to related parties, and they were all bailed out. Following the crisis, government took measures to strengthen the economy, restructure the banking system, and deregulated the monopolized sectors. The macroeconomic stability after these measures caused growing integration with the international financial markets and encouraged us to reform in the corporate governance related subjects. The very first response to the developments came from the Turkish business itself. In 2002, the Turkish Industry and Business Association issued its Corporate Governance Code of Best Practice. Although this code focused only on the board of directors, it can be considered as a first initiative of the development of corporate governance in Turkey and shows the willingness of the business to take initiatives by itself. Meanwhile, the Capital Markets Board, let's say CMB, aimed to restructure the Turkish capital market due to the increased competition conditions in the international area and needed to update its regulation in line with the global trends. So initiated the project to form a corporate governance principles and wants to fill the gaps in main legislation like the Commercial Code and Capital Markets Law, and took the OECD principles as a benchmark. And in 2003, CMB published corporate governance principles for only public companies on a comply or explain basis. And later on revised them several times to be compatible with the OECD principles. And these principles took their final form in 2014. The principles presented in 4 main sections, still the same: shareholders, transparency and disclosure, stakeholders, and board of directors. Although the principles were primarily prepared for the listed companies, CMB acknowledged that the principles can also be used by all joint stock companies. Then later on in 2005, to raise the awareness of the principles and ensure effective implementation, listed companies were required to prepare and disclose corporate governance compliance reports. In their annual reports starting with 2005. They should indicate which principles they met, and if not, explain why not. And of course, the board of directors and the company can be held liable for any information contained in the reports. Same year, banking law was enacted. It addresses the corporate governance requirements for the banks and the financial holding companies. In 2007, Borsa Istanbul launched a corporate governance index. And to be included in the index, listed companies are subject to yearly independent assessments carried out by rating agencies, and they need to pass certain thresholds scores that reflect the quality of their practices. In 2009, public disclosure platform was established. This platform is the main disclosure channel for listed companies. Many different CMB regulations refer to the platform as the main channel to submit requested informations. It's operated by the Central Registry Agency. It's the central custodian of Turkey. The public disclosure platform also contains a general information form, let's say the company profile page, where the company's corporate governance practices are disclosed there. Then until 2012, corporate governance was not regulated on law level, and there were many different rules in different regulations. Finally, in 2012, both the new Turkish Commercial Code and the Capital Markets Law were enacted. These new legislation introduced many novelties, especially in terms of strengthening the position of minority shareholders, like the minority rights has been expanded, privileged shares have been restricted. And these legislation also create new rules for electronic General Assembly and board meetings and online voting, related party transactions, independent directors, inclusion in material transactions, the squeeze out, sellout, and the exit rights, and the protection of shareholders of group companies. Actually, the group companies are regulated for the first time under Turkish law. The reform process was also accompanied with various CMB communiques, especially communique on corporate governance was published in 2014. Overall, CMB's approach to application of corporate governance principle was transformed then. CMB puts stronger emphasis on the hard law characteristics, making compliance with various corporate governance principles mandatory for certain listed companies. For certain listed companies, I mean that the companies whose shares traded on BIST stars, BIST main and BIST submarkets, not all the BIST companies. Other provisions are to be implemented under comply or explain basis, and annual reports must inform the extent to which corporate governance principles are implemented. Why do we need mandatory principles? Actually, a strong legal framework is a prerequisite for the protection of the minority shareholders. But corporate governance has stood apart from the corporate law, in which companies have been permitted to design and structure their own practices within certain boundaries. So completely voluntary regime may be insufficient since there is no guarantee that all companies will implement the reports necessary to provide investors to adequate checks on management and board control. That's why sometimes legal reforms need to be considerably uncommon. We follow this reasoning by imposing mandatory principles for listed companies. In Communic, it's included 97 principles. 24 principles are mandatory. You can see some mandatory principles on my slide. Within the principles, mandatory rules are found only under the shareholder and board of directors headings. Because these parts need improvement the most. The mandatory principles under shareholders aim to increase the involvement of the non-controlling shareholders in decision-making process by facilitating their access to information, right to representation, and right to elect board members. Mandatory rules for the board of directors ensure the effective board composition to restrict the influence of the family members over the company. And also in Communic, listed companies are categorized in 3 groups according to their systemic significance, importance, which is measured through their market capitalization and market value of shares in free float. Category 1 companies are required to comply with all mandatory principles, whereas Category 2 and Category 3 companies benefit from certain exemptions. What are they? Nomination process of independent members. I mean, the Category 1 companies must provide its list of independent board member candidates to the CMB, and CMB should provide its dissenting opinion, if any, regarding the candidates on the list. In such cases, the candidate bearing the negative opinion cannot be elected as an independent director. Second exemption is the number of independent members on the board. It is required in the code that at least 1/3 of the listed company boards to be composed of independent directors. But for the Category 3, 2 is enough. And the license requirements for the investor relation managers is the 3rd exemption. But during our monitoring activities, we found that the compliance reports were not in line with the report format and instead consist of short and standard explanations with limited details. But as we all know, effectiveness of a corporate governance framework critically depends not only the quality of the regulatory structure, but also on its implementation mechanisms. Comprehensive reporting on corporate governance practices and its active monitoring are widely considered to be crucial elements for an effective implementation mechanism. So CMB then decided to introduce a new corporate governance reporting system. We developed our new system with the EBRD's assistance and entered into force in 2019. In this system, companies are expected to accurately and clearly declare their compliance with the principles and to provide an explanation in accordance with specific criteria regarding the principles that they do not fully comply with. What is the how they explained deviations from the principles? Companies should briefly set the company's specific context and the historical background for the deviation, and provide a convincing and understandable rationale for their choices they made, and describe mitigating actions to address an additional risk, and indicate whether the exception is limited in time and whether the company intends to achieve compliance. According to new methodology, companies are required to prepare the compliance report formats. It includes the issue answers on questions relating exclusively to the all non-mandatory principles, and the corporate governance information filings, and it includes the issuer's answers questions relating to a set of both mandatory and non-mandatory principles. These forms should be filed on the public disclosure platform. And in addition to these forms, companies in the annual report should explain the compliance statement where they list which non-mandatory provisions are not complied with. This structure actually provides us a picture of the governance practices at a given point of time and enable comparability over time and across companies. Here is the compliance report format template. There are sections for the reference to the principles and the company compliance status, and the explanation in case of no or partial compliance. And here is the template for the corporate governance information filings. Actually, it is very useful for the factual information on actual governance practices for us, also for market participants. There are also the section references and requested information section and the company's responses. Companies can link to the public disclosure platform or notifications, or also give the reference to annual reports or their websites. So listed companies submit disclosure in relation to their compliance status, corporate governance practices, and provide explanation in case of non-compliance within the scope of a new framework. As a regulator, we can cross-check their compliance status and the real practices of the company with this framework. In 2020, to improve the ESG awareness and sustainability reporting of listed companies, we amended our communique to ensure that public companies take concrete steps to comply with the ESG principles. And also we published the Sustainability Principles Compliance framework, which covers the environmental, social, and governance principles for the listed companies. The compliance with the sustainability principles is voluntary, and it operates on a comply or explain basis. In the same year, with the EBRD's support, we issued our first corporate governance monitoring report on corporate governance practices of BIST 100 and BIST 30 companies. This report prepared to promote compliance with the corporate governance principles and also offer guidance to companies. And the overall compliance level of the companies about 8%. But the findings of the report suggest that there's still room for improvement for quality and accuracy of the disclosures. In 2022, we published the Green Bond and the Green Scoop guidelines, and this guideline is aligned with the EU and the International Capital Market Association standards on green bonds and Scoops. This guidelines aims to make sure that green sustainable bonds and green sustainable Scoops are issued in compliance with the best practices and standards. That's all of our efforts until now. Maybe finally I can add that I would like to say that Turkey is ranked the 33rd among 119 current economies in the ease of doing business, according to latest World Bank annual ratings. This assessment also covers the strength of minority shareholder protection, and the rank of Turkey improved to 21st in 2020. And we try to do our best. Thank you very much for your listening, and over to you, Caroline, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Ale. And it was good to hear Capital Market Board of Turkey perspective and implementation. So now I think we will move to Borsa Istanbul. We would like to also hear Borsa Istanbul experience and practice. And Gülhan Gülay, he is Borsa Istanbul Executive Vice President, will share us this experience and this journey as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Gülay. And I also would like to thank all the audiences and also all the contributors, and also to the Good Governance Academy and Caroline, of course, and you. Now I would like to share my presentation with you, and so that we can just go over the practices what Borsa Istanbul has already done. I don't know if you're able to see it.
Yes, okay? We can see now.
All right. First of all, I would like to thank to Hale Hanım. She has just mentioned all the legal framework and the general view of what we have already done as Turkey, and also the regulators and the practitioners. So now I would like to go over what we have done as Borsa Istanbul, and also as a regulatory practitioner in the markets. So one of the main things, as everybody knows, is the publicly owned company numbers in one of the in the economies in general, because the publicity is very well accomplished with the corporate governance rules and regulations. So last 2 years we have just made huge efforts for new incomers to the markets, and we had just already made over 100 initial public offerings in the last 2-3 years, and for this, although of course the environmental and the conjunctural circumstances were very positive for the Turkish companies for new public offerings, but we also visited a lot of over 150 companies in person, and held meetings with the chambers of the industry and commerce, and our visits made meet with the great interest And so we are also expecting more and more and larger companies to come to the market after these encouragements, and also new companies, new incomers, and the increasing number of investors. And as you can imagine, one of the key things about the expansion in the capital markets is the demand and the supply. So in the last years, we have also increased the number of investors, and we are now over 4 million investors in Borsa Istanbul, which was like 1 million before the pandemic years. So in last 2 or 3 years, we have just reached to 4 million, and the demand size has increased. So we had to increase the supply side and just have a good combination of demand and supply, which encouraging the capital markets to establish a concrete base for the corporate governance. So as I said, more than 100 new listings has just increased more than 20% of the market. And as a result, we have improved our communication with the companies, and we started to reach the industry leaders, and also the encouragement also carried on for newcomers. Well, these are the numbers, and we are now reaching like to 500 companies. And by the way, I should just also mention the Capital Markets Board and Borsa Istanbul's invaluable efforts in the public offerings. They have just made a lot of overtimes for the last 2 or 3 years, which they had just tried to reach out to the demands for the public offerings. So moving to the important developments in the markets that Borsa Istanbul has actively supported is that, as our previous contributors has just mentioned, in 2007, the Borsa Istanbul has introduced this corporate governance index, which includes the companies that implement the corporate governance principles, which Hayla has just in detail just give us as a framework. So this corporate governance index has just made a lot of contributions for the governance principles to be applied by our publicly owned companies. In the first run, it has a immediate impact on the business, but as you can imagine, they had been hard to swallow by some of the companies, because it had some touches to the points that Hayla mentioned, especially the family-owned companies and family-ruled companies were very hard to go public, plus share the corporate governance principles with their investors. And also another thing that I want to mention about the corporate governance principles or corporate governance and public offerings, before going to the other indexes or other things, that is the BSTEP program, which we are trying to support the institutionalization of the potentially growing companies, and prepare them for capital markets and for the initial public offerings, because our companies, as mentioned before, has some resistance with going to public, and also with going to public, especially with the corporate governance principles. So in this program, what we are trying to give them as starting from the family law, we are just trying to give them the initiatives that whatever they do for the sake of going public will just strengthen them in their corporate principles and also as corporates, so that the lifetime and the lifespan of the company would increase more than decades. Because, as mentioned before, our companies, family-owned companies' life cycle is not more than 3 or 4 generations. So to have older and stronger firms, we have to have more and more publicly owned and corporately strong companies. So this is one of the things that we encourage the companies in the corporate governance and also going public issues. And also in going back to the important developments in the corporate governance and disclosure in Borsa Istanbul, we in 2014 we had the sustainability index, which this one was first calculated according to IRIS evaluations on companies, and these were on the environmental, social, corporate governance and performance principles. And in the till 2021 we continued with IRIS, but in 2021 we just saw that there is a need to change and improve our sustainability index and compliance about it. So we changed the company to Refinitiv, and the Refinitiv collaboration has just bring us a new methodology for the sustainability index. And this collaboration made more transparent ESG assessments, and the index has opened to all listed companies, and the fees are covered by Borsa Istanbul. So we supported our companies to come and make their evaluation, their applications through the Refinitiv applications, and so that we could have more and more collaboration and more solid corporate governance. So on in 2021 and 2022, we started to calculate new sustainability indices, and one of them is the Sustainability Participation Index, which complies together with the ESG and the Islamic finance tenets, so that the Islamic-based investors and the supporters of the Islamic finance would just come and invest in this kind of participation index. And also we have the Sustainability 25 Index, which includes companies with high ESG performance and high market capitalization and liquidity, so that it would be a more investable or mimicking possibilities of this index would just rise up for the exchange traded funds, and so that this would just go more solid results for the sustainability. We also start to calculate some other thematical indexes, like İş Portföy Women at Business Index, which is a very early and first gender index in Turkey, and it is calculated on behalf of his İş Asset Management and has a mutual fund over it, so that it would just make more contribution on the woman in the business, on the and the corporate governance issues. And also I can just according to my time, I should just briefly explain you the Sustainability Reporting Guide, the Integrated Reporting Guide, and Climate Reporting Guide. And these are the guides on reporting and disclosure in corporate governance and disclosure terms. And as you know, as mentioned before, corporate governance communique is mandatory disclosure for listed companies. Explain whether they comply with the corporate governance and sustainability principles, and if not, as mentioned before, explain the implications in terms of the environment and social risk management. So in general, these are the new, contributions that Borsa Istanbul has made in the corporate governance scores and practices. And there are some interesting things that I want to also mention with you. After our ESG scores in the Refinitiv, we have just seen that we have some world leader companies in some of their in their areas, like the white goods sector, automobile sector, and there are some holdings that are ranked amongst the top 10s or 3s, or they had been champions in their area. So this has also gave the encouragement to our other companies to be more and more compliant with the corporate governance rules. So I think, and also I would like to thank, before finishing, to our stakeholders like ERTA, to Güler Hanım, and also to Capital Markets Board, Hale Hanım, and her colleagues about the cooperation and coordination about the corporate governance and disclosure regulations and also practices. So thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, I can just take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gökhan Bey. Caroline, now floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was very comprehensive. I think we've got a couple of questions. The first question I actually responded to already was, we see the legislation, and you spoke a little bit about that you hope that other companies would follow the guidance that you have at the Bursa. But is there specific guidance available for companies that are not listed?
Yes, sure. They can. We also just gave the opportunity for all the companies to connect to Refinitiv, and they can just enter their scores, and they can have a score from the Refinitiv, so that they have the ranking and also some kind of a you can just say advertising or something that's showing their compliance with the corporate governance and also sustainability and everything about that.
Thank you. And I guess that's the next question, is around the ESG or sustainability reporting. Is this going to become a mandatory requirement? And then also to Güler, from your perspective, in terms of mandatory. But let me just first of all start ask the exchange.
Well, we are planning to do that, but it's a question of making the companies to suffer from that, because we just gave them some timing about having regulations and the principles to be more compliant on their side, so that we want to just give them a little bit more time. And just because of the earthquake and some economical problems that has been occurred in the last years, we just want them to have a recovery period of time, so that but finally, definitely it is going to be something that is mandatory, but not this year or the next year. Right. But together with CMB, with Hale Hanım and her team, we should just talk about it when it should be the right time, but not very close, but will.
Thank you. And Hale, would you like to comment on that from your perspective?
Actually, it's not easy to such a thing now, but maybe it takes time. I give you information about the corporate governance journey, and also the ESG takes time to implement, to understand to monitor all the principles first. Then maybe we can give a mandatory status for some principles.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And then Gula, from your perspective, the integrated reporting is voluntary as I understand it. And in terms of the sustainability standards perhaps also being voluntary, from an integrated perspective, what have your lessons learned been around adopting an international best practice that is voluntary from a corporate perspective?
My perspective is very clear. Of course, companies need a time to prepare to, produce this kind of information. It is not like providing information. They have to implement first, which means that they need to transform their company. So it means that they need a time, they need a technical support, need a financial support. So after that, they are getting ready to disclose this information. So we are in this stage in Turkey. So we are trying to push the company and motivate the company to prepare to produce sustainability information in this, and also how they transform themselves. They need really support. This is the first process. But second one is that how they disclose this information. What should be their framework? What should be the standards? So we are now based on, we are working with the public oversight, accounting and auditing standards bodies. So they are responsible to raise the sustainable standards aligned with the global standards. So they represent all companies in Turkey, not only listed companies, but also all companies in Turkey. So we are working closely with this organization and also Capital Market Board of Turkey and also Borsa Istanbul and related all organizations to understand how can we supportive for the companies to get it ready for this stage. So, which is really important. And on the other side, the publicly listed companies, it's important they are all competitive, they have all competitive power of these companies. They already know how they disclose and how they implement. So I think, in my opinion, it's my personal opinion, they have to be ready because they are representing many stakeholders, not like small and medium-sized enterprises. And they have knowledge, information, and mostly they have financial also, some to disclose this kind of information. But still, they need help to get ready. So we have a lot of discussion with Capital Board of Turkey and to make it mandatory. But the good news is that even some disclosure rules, comply and explain rules. The first year, even the Capital Market Board raised these rules 2 years ago. Even it was the first year last year. Over 70% of the companies disclose regarding the Capital Market Board framework. So in this year, I'm sure that I didn't do any research this year. I'm sure that this year we will see more, maybe 90%. Even compliance and explains all rules, companies eager to disclose this information because of the market expectations getting changed, all, not only shareholder side, but also all stakeholders, especially fund providers and financial institutions, bank and investors, very much interested in this information. Without this information, they don't feel they are safe. They have to just invest or, communicate with company. They have low risk than others. So which means that they have to manage the ESG governance of environment and social issues better than others. So that's why I'm optimistic about the Turkish companies that are now, trying to get it ready to disclose this information. And then Capital Market Board very much, and Borsa Istanbul very much working close with the companies and all related NGOs to, without any over-regulation,
Yes.
They are giving time to companies to be ready to mandatory.
Get the house.
Which is really important. We don't want to see just disclose without internalize, without any real implementation, which is two very important risks for us. We don't want to see the company just disclosing because of the Capital Market Board asking them mandatory. So we want to see the real output of this implementation, Caroline, not like somebody asking.
Just a checkbox.
Yes, just need to see the impact of the society, impact of the economy, impact of the global world. This is our common aim. We are not like the formal people to just tell the companies to do something. We want to see the positive result of this kind of regulations, principles, rules, and implementation. This is my perspective.
Thank you very much. And we're way out of time, and I have gone over. So thank you very much for staying on for the extra minutes. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your time to all of you, and thank you for joining us here on the Good Governance Academy. The video, the recording is available as a link through the Good Governance Academy's event page. It is on YouTube, the live stream, and I will make it available to everyone online through those processes. Thank you very much to all of you. I really